All right, you're watching the UpSet podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about affirmative action, the history, the recent Supreme Court rulings, and some of the implications. So stay tuned. Once again, happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome back to the UpSet podcast. We're happy that you tuned in. And when I say we're, you know what I'm talking about. These wonderful, wonderful people I have joining me right now. Hey, guys.
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Because
Yes.
if it's Sunday, it feels a lot like Friday.
Oh, Lord. At least it's not the day after Saturday. So how's everybody been? This is like a holiday week.
It wasn't. Well, here in the city of Philadelphia, our holiday has been tinged by a level of unutterable sadness due to the loss of life that was caused by a person who we're still trying to sort out what led them to do what they did. But,
Yeah, that was tragic. Every time I see these headlines, I keep like refreshing my page or blinking my eyes as though I'm not seeing, like maybe this was old or,
Yeah.
No, it just keeps happening.
Yeah.
Well, you ask, what about all the guns, gun control? They always run to the podium and say, well, this has got to stop, and there's stronger gun controls. But there are ways that people are getting guns, and they don't have to go the traditional route of licensing and background check. In fact, I think was it Biden that signed an executive order to go after those companies who make gun kits, which you don't have to register. You just buy the parts.
Wow.
You put it together
Like
and do your thing.
Build a gun.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the, I forget, I think it's called Polymer 80 is one of the companies here in the city of Philadelphia in connection with the Giffords Foundation. Most of you remember Gabby Giffords, the congresswoman from Arizona, I believe it was, who was shot by an individual.
Right.
Well, that foundation in connection with the city of Philadelphia, they're suing Polymer 80 and there's another three-letter initials, another company that does the same thing where basically you order the parts to the gun and assemble it. These are what you classically call ghost guns.
Ghost guns.
And in Philadelphia back in 2017, there may have been 8 or 9 cases in Philadelphia where you had ghost guns. Last year we had 500. I mean, because people are more and more people are just buying these kits and assembling their guns. And this right to bear arms that people consider to be sacrosanct is killing us, literally.
Right. Yeah. Well, a lot of people, you would think with the shootings, would bring more awareness, but a lot of people are now wanting guns to defend themselves against them. So it's like increasing the desire for a gun the more we have a shooting.
Right.
So
we're back to the Wild Wild West.
We are. You want to have a frightening moment? Go down in Philadelphia to the office where people have to apply for their carry permit. And that is the permit that allows you to carry a gun in public. You will see it looks like the Thriller video. I mean, some of those people, you think to yourself, these are the last people I want to see carrying a gun in public. I mean, some of those folks look like Darwin's missing link. And they are getting the permission to carry guns, and so why do you need to carry a gun? Everybody got a gun. I will carry me one of them too. And it's just frightening to see who's getting guns out there these days.
I've seen more store owners carrying guns. I went into I've seen plenty of videos where the owner of the store or clerk, when they're in the process of them being robbed, they just pull out their own gun, and usually the assailant will take off, or there's a gunfight. But there are more and more business owners. I went to a pawn shop once. I knew something that was up because, they had to buzz you in, and there was a gate, a wrought iron gate you had to come through. And then when you walk to the counter, the salesman would come with not one, 2-gun holster. And he just simply said, "How can I help you?" Like,
That is the Wild West.
first of all, you could help me by putting away those guns. But I mean, they were pearl handle, big Smith. These are like 2 cannons on him. He made the point. If you have any ideas, right now,
I get it.
There's something. I mean, I know this is not our topic, but I was talking with some folks in the wake of the shooting in Philadelphia, where a person shot these 5 people. At one point, when they shot an individual, this guy shot an individual. Someone came to that individual's aid, pulled their gun, and shot back. And now, as much as you wouldn't want to say so, that might have saved lives, because once he started shooting back at this guy, the guy started running. And that ended his foray, and he was just going down the block randomly shooting people. The 5 people he shot didn't know each other. They just were going about their business. And once someone shot back at him, he retreated, and then he laid his weapons down and waited for the police. And so people are making the point now that, shooting back allows people to think twice, and I get it.
Yeah.
You ever see the movie Tombstone?
Oh yeah.
It makes that point very clear. Very
clear. Or the movie in Clint Eastwood, I forget which one that was with Clint Eastwood.
Said, "Go ahead and make my day."
No, this is where Gene Hackman said, "You no good so-and-so, you just shot an unarmed man." And Clint Eastwood sneered, "Well, he should have armed himself." And so.
Gosh. Oh, mercy.
But it's a terrible situation, and we really
very much so.
And a lot of our urban areas into Dodge City.
Open areas. Try churches. Most churches now have armed guards on patrol, and I know plenty of pastors who are armed while in the pulpit. Plenty.
I was just at a wedding last week, and I mean, he had his suit on with his gun to the side.
Right.
Trying to figure out.
Nobody told me I could bring a gun to the wedding. Things would have been different for me.
There was one mega church that did a video on safety, church safety, and they had a whole. I don't know if these were members who were police officers, but they had a whole, they had an unmarked car right at the entrance of the parking lot, who would monitor cars coming in. When you walked in, you saw what appeared to be ushers, but when you see the little sir mic in their ear, you knew that they were security. And it's a shame that our churches have had to go to that, but people have been shot and killed in churches. So
True.
It's necessary.
Yeah,
it's necessary.
Absolutely necessary. All right. Before we jump into our topic, I did want to bring up something in, I guess, pop culture I was looking at yesterday, and it's this whole little thing that happened with Keke Palmer and her boyfriend. Did you guys hear about that?
Yes, I did.
You heard about that?
Yes, I did.
So for those who didn't hear about it, well, Keke Palmer, I always remember Keke Palmer as the actress from the movie Akeelah and the Bee. That's when she was a little kid. Of course, she's grown up now.
A whole lot.
She's a grown woman, and recently had a baby with her boyfriend, and recently she was it an Usher concert? I know it was an Usher.
She was at an Usher concert. Yeah,
and she had on an outfit that was sheer at the bottom.
It sure was.
Revealing. And he was serenading her. At concerts they do that thing where somebody comes up and they're so Usher was serenading her, and the whole thing about it was, the big uproar was that her boyfriend tweeted something to the effect that, you're a mother. Pretty much, I forgot the exact words, but he was pretty much shaming her for acting that way, dressing that way, and she's supposed to be a mother. So people were coming hard for her boyfriend because they felt like he was just jealous and that she should be allowed to wear what she wants to wear, and how dare he, comment on this. Like I was seeing like even some of our people really upset by this response. And after the heat, he didn't back down. He doubled down on how he felt like, this is my conviction. I don't feel like she should be doing this. And so I was thinking about it. I was like, how do I feel about this? I mean, first of all, if you've seen Keke Palmer recently, she's not, she's very expressive. She's very seductive in her expression these days and whatever. So it's like, I was surprised that he had such a reaction to this particular thing. But I think the thing that got me the most was that he did it publicly. Like, he shamed his own girlfriend in front of the world. Like, my thing is, that's a conversation to have with her at home or something. But so I just want to know what you guys think. Like, I mean, I'm sure your significant others wouldn't be out there being serenaded by Usher in a sheer.
Well, it wasn't just a serenade. She actually began to dance with him too, and it was a little bit seductive. And the term that is commonly used now is slut shaming.
Yes,
that's the actual term that gets used, and they're dancing seductively, and suddenly the woman that she was that got his attention is now the mother of his child, and he wants her to be a little bit differently.
Right. Is that how it works, guys? Like, it's no. Yeah. I was gonna say, like, once you become a mother, there should be a shift. I mean, I don't want to open up this can of worms, but I'm just
Well, I kind of feel that if you are of a certain level of decency before you're a mother, should be good enough so that when you become a mother, there won't be a need for a shift.
Okay. The merchandise, I mean, one of the problems with the entertainment world in particular is the merchandising of the soul, where you have become a product and you are selling merchandise and you're selling sexuality. And it wasn't just with Keke Palmer, but also at the Essence Award, you had Janelle Monáe, where she bared her bare bosom, lifted her top and showed her breast. And then you had Megan Thee Stallion, who stallionized on stage a whole lot. And I mean, the selling of sexuality is okay until suddenly a relationship is involved and you feel compromised by that sale. Which is what happened with the boyfriend. This is the mother of my child up there writhing seductively with the man who has been known to bring the daughters of Zion low.
I just don't think it's ever a time that you should put your significant other on Front Street, ever. I agree. No matter how you might feel, no matter how ashamed you may feel about something, it's hard to come back from that, and then you tweet it out to how many hundreds and thousands, and now it's millions and millions.
It
happen, or there's an agreement in them. I don't know what's wrong.
I just wonder what that conversation was like after
afterwards.
Like what you doing? And then to do it again.
He won't be having any more children with her.
Wow, but this is interesting. Interesting response. I thought it was interesting how so many people came to her defense, and I couldn't figure out if it was because they felt like it was more so they felt like you said, he was slut shaming her and they didn't like that, but they were almost defending her being a mother and still being a woman and being able to express herself, her sexuality, and not being shamed by men. So it's like people were kind of using this to fight back against other things systematically, or they personally have dealt with as relates to
and a lot of times folks will say, well, do you expect a woman to remain at home barefoot and pregnant all the time and not have a life? So
she can put shoes on.
Anyway,
quick question on that.
Go
ahead. Go ahead, Pat. No,
The next thing is it a publicity stunt? You know,
good point.
you know, sometimes in that world, you know, now you find out 2 months later there's a film coming out, or there's something happening, and then you know, the entertainment world is different than our world.
Yeah.
The question I would ask, and especially Tasha, to you, seeing that the good Reverend Debro is not with us, that a strength is denoted by the ability to effect change, and for a woman, it is empowering for her to realize that she can affect change by her desirability. And does that speak truth to you, Tasha, as a woman?
When you say, because the way you worded that, Tally, what do you think?
Well, I mean, really,
womanly
for
wild.
example, I played football, and the ability to affect change is my ability to know that when I went into the backfield and tackled a quarterback, that changed their game plan. I affected change. And so I would try to hype that up, that I could do that. For a woman, desirability, which affects change in those to whom you wish to be the object or subject of desire, is that empowering to know that you can affect change like that? Is that for a
I
woman?
think to some women it is, and some people lead with that. I mean, they may be smart, they may have a lot of things going for them, but they hype up their beauty or the things that they think will draw men, and they focus on that. I personally don't operate that way. I mean, that's not part of my value system.
The stories you're about to hear are true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. So the question I would ask then is, after a woman is married and that desire, the so-called desired thing has been secured, which is your husband, is there still a need for that empowerment to be there by demonstrating that you can be desirable to others, Tasha?
No, I don't need that. I mean, I feel like if I have a spouse and that's the object of my desire, and I'm the object of his desire, there's no need to prove that I desired by anyone else. What's the point?
Okay, I just was asking.
Some people need their ego stroked that way, but
I was just asking.
I don't know. I think there's a certain level of security you have that's not necessary.
I think for those who might not have high self-esteem, you know, they may crave constant attention, constant affirmation from not just their spouse, but from anybody who can give it to them to try to fill that void.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know. That's my opinion.
I think that goes on both sides too.
You know now, Elder. Today, you know. Last week you were guessing. Now you know.
Now I know.
Well, I think some couples, some spouses, if they're either going to church or going out on a date or a concert or whatever, it's pretty common that the spouse will ask the other spouse, "How does this shirt look?" or "How's this dress? You like this dress? How does this dress?" I think my wife outdresses everybody, but because she's just that's how she grew up. Her mother was a seamstress, made a lot of clothes. So, but I have never ever had to say to my wife, I don't think so, not today, kind of thing. So sometimes for spouses, you have a chance.
When you met her at church, Chuck, we'll talk about it offline. We good.
He said we met her at church.
No, she was a good dresser then, and she remained a good dresser, appropriate, and yet attractive. So you can be attractive without being,
exposing body parts.
A friend of mine's wife told him if he ever told her that what she was wearing was inappropriate, that he would not see her anymore. The next day, he told her, "Look, that's not appropriate." And true to her word, she didn't see him. He didn't see her for days.
True story.
But about after the fourth day, though, the swelling in the right eye went down, and he could see her a little bit.
I knew something was coming. I was waiting for it. No, I feel like that could be a whole topic in and of itself because those dynamics. Like, I'm the type of person, I want my husband to tell me if something looks a little. I don't want to go out in the world and I feel like we have an agreed upon standard. I think sometimes it varies for spouses in terms of what's appropriate.
Okay, on this day, she also said,
okay. I mean, how does a husband take, a friend or an acquaintance and they come up to him and say, "Man, your wife is hot."
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going with, Charles, when you're talking about being out. I thought you meant like seeing someone else kind of checking out your spouse and you're like, yes, this is mine. Like, is it pride that swells up? Is it?
Well, you know what? My thing is, my wife dresses so well when she steps out of the house. I don't care. People say, "Whoa," because
it's that talk, Charles. It's because I don't even swing that way, and I want to date Charles now.
It's because of the, her matching of colors, and she knows how to. And yet there is some conservatism there. So a woman can look attractive with clothing, but don't have to be, splits all the way up to the waist.
You don't have to look like one of Santa Claus's 3 friends.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, this is a topic we're going to pick back up at another time because someone had asked for us to address dress and the relationship between like women and men in terms of women being told not to dress a certain way because they would be they would lead men astray or they would be an object of. So, and someone asked us to address it because they felt like some people have been traumatized by that way of thinking or making women feel like it's your fault. It's the way you carry yourself, the way you dress. That is
and there has been criticism of worship leaders in churches, like praise teams that would come up and really not appropriately dressed to do a praise team performance.
Their back is to the audience most of the time. A lot of times, choir directors and so forth.
Yeah, so that's something worth at least discussing because everybody has an idea of what's appropriate and what's not.
Right. So the solution is to bring back all the robes, and we won't have this problem anymore.
Right. That's
you see, he
cover everything.
He didn't think about that last week.
No. Flesh and blood did not reveal that to him.
I'll tell you, the oil makes a difference.
Yeah. All right, guys. So it's time for us to now transition into our topic of the evening. And, we touched a little bit last week in our opening remarks, but, some of you reached out and asked us to do a little deeper dive into this whole topic of affirmative action. A lot of people are not aware of the history, how it even came about. Some people still don't understand what this decision from the Supreme Court really means right now and even down the line. So we kind of wanted to tackle it a little bit. And I'll start by saying this week, one of my Facebook friends, is actually someone I grew up with, posted, "I am a product or I benefited from affirmative action," right? And that's all he said. It was just supposed to, and he works for NASA. Brilliant gentleman, has a lot going for him. And I saw that one of his friends, it was a white lady. She commented, "How do you know?" And at first I was like, why people always gotta, but I said, what, let me read. And so he responded to say that he knew he benefited from it because actually on the documentation for college, it said something like, it was spelled out, like makes a promising person of color hire or something like that. Something to that effect. So the woman wrote back and said, "Oh, thank you. I never really understood what it meant." And it was like she wasn't asking to jump at him. She really had no understanding. And to me, it revealed that a lot of people have a little bit of ignorance as it relates to it. They hear affirmative action as something that we're getting some advantage that's not fair. And that they run with that narrative, not understanding, one, how it came about, what it really means, and why this impacts particularly communities of color so much. So let's start by talking about the history. Go ahead, Tyler.
And most people, the expression affirmative action, people say it and they don't know what it means, where it comes from. And it gets traced back to Lyndon Johnson's executive order 11246 back in 1965. But actually, the language and the intent of it came from John F. Kennedy, executive order 10925, that stated, and I quote, that government contractors, quote, take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and employees are treated during employment without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. In other words, it is an action that the government was taking that should be affirmative, positive, towards creating equality. President Johnson enlarged upon it to include sex and gender as a part of it. But the idea is that actions are taken in a positive direction to ensure equality and equal access, and to promote a level of fairness across the playing field. It is the government's action. It is the employee's action to affirm the request to have equality there. So that's how it gets out there, affirmative action.
Right.
You're talking about ignorance. I thought it was just schools.
No,
I thought it was just universities and schools. I had no clue.
Employees.
Yep, that it was employees until this happened. I started reading about it. I said, I thought they were just talking about schools.
Right.
Yeah, schools became the flashpoint in the 1990s in California.
Right.
Where the University of California Regents, with a black man leading out, incidentally, a gentleman by the, I never will forget, I'd just gotten into radio and I interviewed him. His name was Ward Connerly. I never will forget the guy, because I kept saying, how could a black man come against this? But they were fighting it in California, and the University of California was the first school to kill affirmative action, saying
the whole
that,
state.
Beg pardon?
The whole state.
The whole state.
25 years ago,
and then
California said, from a state point of view, no consideration for race.
Yeah,
and there are actually 8 other states that have made that determination. But when I look at the grand scheme of things, I know affirmative action can be interpreted as a fixer. Let's fix this.
Yeah.
I think affirmative action in some cases, not all cases, is treating the symptom and not the cause. I think that it's such a complex situation. We really need to start at grade level school quality, access to schools that can prepare our young people for college. And unfortunately, people of color grew up in neighborhoods where the schools were not fully supported. The schools were low quality, no equipment, teaching was marginal. And so how do you prepare people of color to compete, in college? So I think one of the ways we can look at affirmative action and whether it's effective or not is fix the schools, fix our educational process. Because there are data points that say schools that have invested heavily, a lot of suburban schools who are supported by, local school taxes, they get the best buildings, they get the best equipment, the best teachers, the best labs, and they're preparing their kids, where in some inner city schools are almost the exact opposite. And then you compound that with social and economic and family issues. Many of our young people just aren't prepared because of cultural, existences.
Yeah. And I mean, you bring up that point, which made me think about, I don't know if you guys saw that. I guess it went viral at some point, that clip from Joy Reid, the correspondent for MSNBC, and how she was sharing her story of how she was, she grew up in a relatively poor neighborhood or middle class neighborhood, and she was saying that she was smart, she just did well, she even under those circumstances. And she was saying how she never would have been able to attend Harvard if a recruiter had not come out to her little town that no one ever knew of to interview her and see that she was pretty smart and therefore could recommend her for the program at Harvard. And then when she was there, this is the part that got me, she found that people were saying, why are you here? You know, pointing to her and the other Black people, like, why are you here? Or pointing them out as, you know, they're just here because of this affirmative action. And the point was, she and some of her Black college mates were smarter than some of the people that were there, but they were trying to paint them as token, like they're just here because they need to fill in these spots. And I think that's another misconception a lot of people have about affirmative action, is that they're just choosing people just to fill this Black quota or, you know, women's quota or whatever. And really, these are smart people who can do the work, who have the intelligence, that just have not had the opportunity because no one's recruiting them, no one's telling them or making it possible financially because of the neighborhoods they come from them to attend. And
and there's a long history of hidden skeletons in higher ed institutions of their college admission practices. So it's not based on, you know, how well you did, your potential, but what's your last name? Who are you connected with? How much net worth do you have? And so it's been an unfair practice for a long time. And so for folks to suggest that someone who deserves a shot should get a shot, it was controversial at the time when it first came on the scene. And now we see that they're repealing these actions, these affirmative actions that were necessary to equalize the playing field. Now, I don't know if it brought equity, like Chuck said, but it did help diversify the workforce and higher ed.
Right. And I think people think that we reached that point that now, okay, we've had it for several years now. We're good. Now everybody can stand on their own, right? You know, we don't need to distinguish whether someone is. But nah, we
the data shows that in those schools that had affirmative action and were race-based and then went to race neutral, data shows that enrollment dropped. So, you know, that's a data point worth looking at. But, you know, a lot of times schools that may, appear to be racist or racial in their selection of students also consider other criteria. And if they honestly hold to those requirements or those extra things, like a person who works in the community or is self-motivated and can prove that they do things outside of the classroom that points to their integrity and what have you, schools, if they're honest and fair, will also consider those things, whether you're white or Black. That's in theory. Not all schools do that, but there is other criteria the schools decide whether you're a worthy student for their university or their college.
Affirmative action in many instances is based on the recognition that the United States of America had affirmative action before affirmative action, which is a matter of preference. And that is, white people were preferred over other people, whether they were Black or whether they were Native or whether they were Asian or whether they were Latino. That existed, a preference. Even now, there are affirmative actions that are still in place in some of the schools that just got rid of affirmative action based on race. And that is, if your ancestor attended Harvard, then you can be admitted to Harvard as a legacy student. I mean, so there are all sorts of affirmative actions that are still existing that prefer different people. And the question became, with the most recent Supreme Court case, shall race be considered as a part of a preferential selection process? And the Supreme Court said no, even though, what was the guy's, Brett Kavanaugh, was admitted to his school because his granddaddy had gone to school there. So he was an affirmative action child on the preference of ancestry. So, preference is, we have to recognize that there are still preferential treatments in place.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And one of the things that resulted from, the affirmative action, I don't call it movement, but decision, was that a lot of colleges and businesses were now hiring more diversity and inclusion. You saw a lot more of those types of jobs coming up because schools and organizations wanted to show that we're not just saying that, we want to be diverse. We're actively hiring someone to make sure we're making these markers. And I'm wondering now how those roles will be impacted. I mean, I think it's some companies are still committed to that. I mean, even though the Supreme Court made this particular ruling, some still say, and I think you talked about this last week, Charles, that we still plan to follow the same practices that we have in the past. Because I think there's something about having a statement. Like some people look for those statements on websites and colleges about we support all, we accept all. And I think that's why some of the enrollment dropped when colleges started removing those things, because people know they don't want to go into an environment where it's going to be hostile and they have nothing to back them up, because they said, we didn't tell you we were supported that in the first place. So you came here, at your own risk, kind of thing.
When you look at a lot of the other criteria, whether all universities or colleges use this, it still is a reflection on society. For instance, some schools, if you eliminate race as criteria, you take that out of the mix, many schools will admit a child, a child of color, based on leadership, recommendations, life experience, awards, essays, extracurricular activity, SAT and GPA. But those other factors is, in my opinion, a reflection of our cultural life. I believe that African-American neighborhoods where the parents and the leaders in that neighborhood would intentionally take their children even after school and prepare them, have them for, learn leadership, have them learn, life experiences, taking their life experience into consideration. Those higher institutions of education, if they're honest in their admission criteria, will seriously take those things in consideration, whether you're white or black.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a reflection on culture. Are we really preparing our young people for higher education? And there are some other data points that says some households where the parents are college graduates have a slight edge on those households where the parents are not college graduates.
Right.
So it is a very complex, it is a societal complex situation. And those individuals who are greedy, the private education, industrial complex, they take advantage of cultural weaknesses. Okay. And we find ourselves asking why. Okay. So you take race out of the list of criteria. Okay. What about the other things that schools should consider in letting, a child, not just, SAT and GPA scores.
Yeah. And a lot of it is also the almighty dollar. And I was talking about Joy Reid earlier. One of the things she also said was that she went to school with a lot of people whose family members were on the names of buildings. So, okay, so you're competing with people who, the fact that your name gets on a building, that means that family has shelled out millions of dollars, in some cases, to the universities. And of course, they want to remain viable financially. So they're going to give preferential treatment to those who have the money to back it up. And oftentimes people in the minority communities don't have that money. They don't have that same, power to be able to buy their children into institutions or, make these promises of grants and donations and all of that stuff. And so it is a disadvantage to and so for people to say, oh, everybody needs to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and follow the process like everybody else, that's just not how it's made up. And if we keep trying to tell ourselves that, then we're disillusioned.
Would you say that our current cultural status as it applies to affirmative action, either historically or present, precipitated in the opening of Black colleges and universities?
Okay.
Ask that again, Charles. I want to make sure I'm hearing you well.
Based on our cultural history and history of civil rights and history of race, discrimination, knowing that whether affirmative action was recognized or carried out by a diverse university or not, did the current truth and status of the discriminatory practices of school, did that precipitate us having, quote unquote, our own schools?
Our own school. I mean, let's talk with the one that is nearest to us, Oakwood. Oakwood was created because they recognize, as a matter of mission, education being a part of the mission, that if we tried to educate Black people alongside white people, that there would be violence. I mean, we realized that this carried on all the way up until the 60s and beyond.
Yeah.
When they tried to bring Black children into white schools as a part of, quote, affirmative action. And so that was at the founding of our own school. Before that, of course, the necessity was there because a white government did not think Black people were worthy of being educated.
Right.
Let's not even think about worthy of hiring in certain positions of authority, power, and influence. And so the need was there to do affirmative things that would create a level of equality, and that to some degree it still exists, but not as much. One person was saying to me earlier this week that one of the problems that we're having now is that affirmative action is no longer giving people equal access to certain opportunities. It is providing equal access to certain levels of elitism. I mean, when you talk about Harvard, the idea of getting into Harvard, and people still think that when you say Harvard, you are immediately saying that somebody is smarter than somebody else.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. People leave
and that is not necessarily the case. You know.
Yeah. I think too, with the HBCUs, a lot of people are saying, all right, now it's time for us to, support our HBCUs because, we value you, obviously knowing that the spots maybe get slimmer and smaller for, Blacks and Hispanics in some of these colleges and universities. They're saying, go where you'll be accepted. Go where you're not going to be bought out by other people, or your application be put under the stack once they see your name sounds Black, so they're not even going to consider you and things of that nature. And I mean, I think that there is something to be said about that. I mean, I attended Oakwood, I attended the HBCU, and I have to say, having had that experience, I felt like I got a good sense of what Black excellence was. Some people said, oh, I want to go where I'll be challenged, and I want to go where, and I'm saying to myself, what are we trying to say? That a Black institution won't challenge us, or there are not people there who are a certain level that, we would want to, and I found some of the most brilliant people that I went to school with. I don't know about you all's experience. They were brilliant, and they've gone on to make considerable contributions. And I think a lot of that came from being celebrated for what they, how smart they were, providing opportunities for them, not having to deal with people tearing them down or telling them that they were only there because they were Black and they were only there. They're not really that smart. You're just filling a spot, and all those negative things that some people experiences on other campuses. I think there is a big advantage to HBCUs. I mean, I'm not going to say I wish they weren't necessary. I wish that we could all go to schools and blend and be a reflection of diversity on every campus, but that's just not our reality.
Well, there are schools that are like that. You go to some campuses and they're white, Black, Asian, mixed together. They have classes together. But the other part about having HBC schools is we need to be as rigorous as other schools with academics and the other criteria that schools use to admit a student, not just because they're Black or not just because they came from Pine Forge Academy.
Right.
I think, you graduated Pine Forge Academy, you have a 3.5 or whatever. Okay, statistically, you are a good candidate. But now let's talk about you as a person. What are your aspirations? What's your life, your roadmap? What do you want to aspire to? And our schools may be doing that. Okay, I'm not saying that we're not, but I'm just saying that I think that's an important part of admitting any school, any student into any school.
It should be noted that the competition at Harvard is more rigorous than the competition at Oakwood.
Yes.
I think we can own that.
Yeah.
But the competition at Harvard is also more rigorous than the competition at Bug Tussle State. you know, because that's just what Harvard is like. That's what Duke is like. That's what Stanford is like. Yeah, I mean, and these schools pride themselves on that, and so we accept that. We have to discuss, but there is something else there, and that is when you go to a Harvard, you're exposed to things that will serve you well in certain settings. Conversations that are had at Harvard with people who are accustomed to going to the French Riviera on summer vacations in Aspen, Colorado. I mean, there are things that you just won't hear about if you're not in those circles. So that exposure gives you a leg up in certain ways. It doesn't mean you're smarter; it just means you have a greater level of exposure.
But you know, Tally, I like what you're saying about that. I had no exposure to the United States of America until I got to Oakwood. I'm just saying, same level, same type of thing. Until I've met friends that said, "Okay, it's spring break, come to my house." What? I didn't know what Ohio looked like. I didn't know what other places looked like. Traveling with the choir, the Aeolians, all of that. I didn't know. And I know what you're saying. You become exposed to certain things. And to be honest with you, when you get to the Harvards and the Yales, there is a level of it's money in the streets. You know what I mean? It's opportunities that's laying there. I do understand that, but I also, you know, when I grew up, it was always Andrews or Oakwood. It was nothing else but those three, or in the New York area, it would have been AUC.
Oakwood, nothing but those three.
No, I'm saying Atlantic Union College.
Oh, I guess. So that math class was not as rigorous.
Yeah, it depends what school I went to. Get that? It's the three that we knew. It was either AUC, Andrews, or Oakwood.
Yeah.
And the truth is that we have to stop saying, okay, this is where you go. It's minimal. It's if you're going to do pastoral work, it's only Oakwood. You know, here is the glass ceiling for Oakwood. You're right, Natasha. I have met people at Oakwood that I believe some Harvard students couldn't measure with them.
Oakwood is somewhat elite. Somewhat. It is. Somewhat. I mean, you know.
The best, listen, the best singers and musicians, yet we're looking at Berkeley. We're looking at Juilliard. We're looking at all the, I mean, music bleeds out of Oakwood. You
know, I was totally unprepared for what I encountered at Oakwood, which is an international student base. With people, you know, I didn't know. I hadn't been around Black children like that, and I remember I went and looked at J.P. Willis, who used to be our education superintendent. You know, I had on my Crass Brothers suit, and he had on a suit made by some guy who couldn't even spell. His name was, you know, Yves Saint Laurent. And I said, "What's this?" I never heard of Yves Saint Laurent. I mean, and that was my introduction to it. But yeah, Oakwood, and it's according to where you go. But back to the affirmative action piece, right. The idea is to make sure that at every level of function, that you allow for a level of diversity, because that serves this nation better. And
right.
And you know, in many ways, Black people are going to be at Harvard, they're going to be at Stanford, but in many ways, this last Supreme Court act is going to increase enrollment at your Morehouses and your Spelman and your FAMUs and your Oakwoods, you know, because Black people are going to say, I don't have to go to Harvard. I can, you know.
Right.
You know,
you know, can I share with you a comment, you know, in my research on this whole issue from a social point of view? I want to read a comment that was written by an individual. He's Asian, actually. And it's a little lengthy, but I'll try to read quickly. He says, with or without affirmative action, it depends on the students who are studying hard to attain and achieve greatness. I'm Asian, studied in a community college, graduated with a postgraduate degree in a not so popular university. But now I'm earning a 6-digit income per year and promoted 3 times at my employment. outsmarting those who studied at Harvard and Stanford. Bases of success after college and university are life experience. At the end of the day, it's not your school who will put you to the top, but your character, attitude, and work ethic. More importantly, discipline, and always remember to respect others and coworkers and stay focused on your goals. Above all, he says, always pray to our Lord Jesus Christ to give you wisdom to help others.
Yeah. I mean, and I was thinking about that, from a Christian standpoint, feeling like we have to rely on these things in order to get ahead or succeed. And, that other side of me was like, well, I believe that what God has for me is for me. I mean, I always say that that's my saying. What God has for me is for me. Any door that's meant to open for me, God will open. We say those things and we believe them. I know I do. But on the other side of it, when you see decisions like that, you do wonder, like, okay, there's a certain measure of, wanting to speak up for I think about my children coming behind me, and I think about wanting to say, I just want to know I have access to the same opportunities as anyone else. And
what do you say to the person? Say someone excels, maybe an engineer or a coder or some kind of inventor, and starts a company, like a Steve Jobs or whatever. And you say, well, what school did you go to? And you come up with Joe's University. And you're like, huh? Who? Where? And yet they are amazingly succeeding.
Yep.
So there is something to your personal drive, your personal, roadmap. Even when you fail, you don't really fail, until you stop trying. So I think all of those things should be instilled in our young people when they're young, and when they're going to grade school, whether it's church school or public school. And when they reach that point of college, entrance, if they want to move on to that, they're prepared mentally and emotionally to carry on. And, a lot of our people, let's be honest, we can't afford the big university. Can't even afford, some can't afford community college.
Right.
And then the college loan thing comes in, and that adds more to.
Right. That's a whole nother.
That's a whole other episode. But let me say this. College is great. I believe that they are wonderful places to grow and discover yourself. But at the end of the day, higher ed is a business.
Yes, it is.
And the business they sell is education.
Yeah.
So, that didn't come from me, Pat. See?
Yeah. So you need to take personal responsibility for your life, for your direction. If you go to college, great. If you don't, great. But listen, take personal responsibility and ownership of your life and your success.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of us at some point may have read Steve Jobs' story. He went to Stanford, and he just said, I think it was in his second or third year, he was bored stiff.
Yeah.
He couldn't handle it because he had so many things going on with him mentally and, scholarly, with his inventive intuition. He left. And I thought it was ironic that then after he became the CEO of Apple, Stanford asked him to come back and speak at their graduation. I just thought that was ironic.
Yeah.
You can look it up on YouTube, Steve Jobs' address at Stanford graduation. It's pretty amazing.
Well, just to amend what GP said about the end of the day, their business is to sell education. It's actually to sell certification, because you can come out of there and not know much of anything. Listen, Donald Trump went through Wharton Business School here at the University of Penn. Most of the students say they don't even remember him doing much in class, but he's got a Penn Wharton School degree, so he is certified. I've always thought that he was certifiable, but now we know that he absolutely is. It is. There's something to be said about the need to make sure, when you talk about affirmative action, you're basically looking at groups that are protected by law, that these groups have to be, given equal access. Question we want to ask now is, when we look at affirmative action, how far do we wish to take it? Initially, affirmative action included 4 basic groups: age, religion, race, and national status.
Yeah.
Now it is included of age, disability, sexual orientation, your pregnancy and marital status. And, we might find ourselves on the end of a lawsuit if someone who is LGBTQIA plus says they won't let me pastor because I'm not a cisgendered individual. Or a woman could sue and say they won't ordain me in some of these conferences because I don't have the right chromosomal content. And we have to ask ourselves, to what degree are we willing to accept the protection of these protected the mandate of these protected classes?
Mercy. I was also thinking too, as we were talking, a lot of people are trying to find, with all of these decisions lately that have just been coming out, the reverse of Roe versus Wade and this and the loan forgiveness, people are just trying to find a way where they can get away from, which is hard to do, the government impacting their lives. You know what I mean? Like, I am tired of being tossed here and there by these decisions. And and some people are promoting like owning your own business, not like, but even that, even saying I'm not going to go to college, I'm going to start some, even that with loans, getting loans for small businesses, you run into some of those same issues where the banks can decide whether or not they want to loan you the money. And sometimes, if you're a person of color, you don't get it. I mean, we've seen discrimination in that area as well. So it seems like everywhere you try to turn to create your own path to get away from people like discriminating against you, or you run into issues, which is why we now have some of those Black-owned banks who are trying to be there for those minorities who want to start businesses so they can encourage it. I mean, it almost seems like it's time for us to buoy ourselves and protect ourselves in certain areas so that we don't have to rely solely on, what we traditionally have to get what we need to be successful. And speaking,
and what might that be, Tasha? I'm noticing her avoiding saying.
No, I'm just saying, as people of color, taking our resources and pulling them together. Sometimes we have the tendency to, we get a certain measure of success and we go off into our corner like, we figured it out. Hope you guys do too. As opposed to saying, let's come together. Let's pool our resources together to help the next generation, to put them in a situation where, they want to go to school. We have a scholarship for them. They don't have to rely on the affirmative action of these universities, or we have jobs. We have our own businesses. We can hire people on a certain level. And, I just feel like it's time for us to, stop waiting on people to do things for us.
That's long overdue. That's long overdue.
Because we have.
Go ahead, Angela Davis.
Because we have the money and we're just spending it on foolishness.
Yes, we
might as well do something positive. I agree with you, Latasha.
Yeah.
Power to the people.
Those universities and colleges, be that as it may, they do have a workaround this new development from the Supreme Court. If those universities and colleges would go by all the other criteria, if they eliminate race consideration, but if you have an Asian, Black, Puerto Rican, whatever, come to your school and they measure up on all those other areas, schools can intentionally bring those young people in because they check all the boxes of the other criteria. And you can say, it's pretty, it's pretty, interesting and admirable that this Black student from a poor family in, urban areas of Chicago or Philadelphia is involved in community, does write well essays, does all these other things. There are schools that can say, this person checks all the boxes and race is not one of them.
Mercy. Well, I know we have to close soon. I I was looking at some of the dissenting or opposing viewpoints from the Supreme Court decision, and one of them was from the Columbia University President Bollinger, and says it feels like the country has been on a course of choosing between a continuation of the great era of civil rights and another view of we've done this long enough and we need a whole new approach. It's now the second choice. And I feel like that summarized the sentiment of so many of the things that we're saying.
Who said that?
This was the Columbia University president.
Columbia University,
New York.
Oh, Columbia. Oh, I thought you meant I thought you meant Columbia Union College.
No.
I was going to say, we can it's going to be some furniture moving around up in there.
Because they support it. I mean, they have been for over 30 years, Columbia University. So, I mean, it's good to hear that some of the universities are and others have expressed how they're not in support of it. But another quote from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson that I liked was, she said that with let them eat cake obliviousness, I like that, let them eat cake obliviousness today, the majority pulls the ripcord and announces color blindness for all, but deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. And I think that, you know, of course, on paper, it sounds nice to say, yes, race is not a factor, but we all know that it's part of a lot, is woven into how we do a lot of things in life. And so to act like it doesn't exist is, you know, kind of putting on our blinders.
Well, and she was talking to Clarence Thomas when she wrote that.
Oh, yeah.
Uncle Clarence, or as we call him, Uncle Thomas.
That's your uncle.
Yeah, I just can't even with him. Like I just when you think someone can't disappoint you anymore, they do it, and he's an example of that for me.
Yeah, well, I kind of feel like you know, it also proves, you know, the urban thought is that just because you look black don't mean you are black.
Or when you've been, sometimes, you know, when you ascend to a certain level and you're so used to blending in and, you know, going along with just to get along, you start to talk like them, sound like them.
Well, you know, if I had one statement to wrap up, you know, my position is, let's start, you know, United States of America, government, people, states, let's start with the cause and not the symptom. The cause is our schools are in shambles, and we need to get our grade schools, our high schools up to par. I went to public high schools, you know, when I was coming up. I didn't go into church schools. And back then at Simon Gratz, you recall Simon Gratz, Bill, they had some outstanding instructors.
They did.
I mean, white, black, you know, just outstanding. We had some of the best teachers, and that was a public school. Very well equipped. We had an orchestra. We had all that stuff in an inner city school. So our schools can improve to prepare our young people for, you know, higher levels. But if we're letting our schools fall apart, we're only adding to the problem.
I agree. Let's promote excellence in our communities. I think that's important as well. You know, always, I mean, I do believe that your gifts will make room for you. So I think that as Christians, as people of color, we should always seek to put our best foot forward. I think sometimes some of us can lean back and wait for a handout. I've seen that happen, you know, but I think we all have a part to play in building ourselves up intellectually, building ourselves up spiritually, most of all, and letting the Lord guide our steps ultimately is what's important. All right.
Well said.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for the discussion. Of course, we can't wait to see how all of you have weighed in the chat. And we always love to read your comments and your perspectives. I would like
looking at some of them right now.
I would like to see if any of you have personally benefited or feel like you've benefited from some affirmative action programs. Please share it with us in the chat. We're interested to see what it's like for some of you out there.
Yes, Allegheny East hired me.
I guess we all have that story, huh?
Yeah.
And you're affirming.
He was an affirmative action hire because he had been at the Florida conference before that, and
So. Yes, he was. All right, guys. Well, we hope you all have a prosperous week. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check out our UpSet merch store. We are so excited to be able to give our first donation to a deserving Pine Forge Academy student, and we're looking forward to the next cause that we can give to. You can check out the UpSet store on our website. Visit aec.org/UpSet and go ahead and make your purchases. They'll go right to your door. Also, if you're nearby and you want to stop by the conference office, let me know, and we can make sure we have your items ready for you to pick up. But thank you all for your support. It's great to be able to give back. And also, if you have a situation that you want us to consider giving to, email us, upset@aecsd.com. We're looking forward to being able to help someone else.
School's going to be starting pretty soon.
That is true.
And there's some families that are figuring out right now how they're going to make that happen.
Yep. So UpSet and the UpSet fam is here to help. All right, guys, have a wonderful week. We'll see you back here next Sunday, because if it's Sunday,
it's the day before Saturday.
I don't know why I continue with this chaos, but I do. All right, guys, see you next time.